Continuing back, we went through release, load, handbrake or separation, and now we're going to talk a little bit about balance. Pretty basic, and yet I think it's something that, because it's one of the key fundamentals of where your mechanics start, your pitching motion starts, I think it's something that we need to focus on a little bit, is where is it? Where is that balance point? You hear about balance point. You should be able to stay on this back leg for a long time as a pitcher, okay? But how are we going to incorporate this, and what are some of the checkpoints we need to look out for? Generally speaking, you heard me in the handbrake section talk about equal and opposite across the midline of the body. I would say that will start up here. I'm not a big fan of offset glove. I like to be more middle. Again, personal preference, but again, if we're talking about what are some of the pros and cons, I think the more you keep things in line, the easier and better off you are to be repeatable, keep your brain in sync with your body. But as it goes to and relates to the handbrake section, I think one of the biggest things that I want to focus on is the connection between that glove and the knee. You notice how as I'm lifting up and pushing down, my knee and my leg are connected. Pretend like there's an invisible string, and you want to keep that invisible string the same tension the whole way through. Now, you might say, well, what if I'm a guy who starts here? You can't expect me to go up here and keep that string tight. No, obviously not. But wherever your hands are, if you're a hands here, or a hands here guy, they should be moving in some sort of cadence. Okay, so if I'm a here guy, right, or if I'm a here guy, maybe there's a lot of movement, or maybe I'm a here guy and it's just a low pop and go. No matter the case, when you're connecting your handbrake and your balance point, try to remember to keep the glove and the lead knee in sync, okay? However you're going to do it. All right, there's that, one of the fundamentals of the balance point, but the motion between balance and the handbrake. And then the next part of this, let's talk about some of the common things that I see with younger players is the balance point. You'll see guys like this, or you'll see guys with an upward toe. Again, none of these are deal breakers, but I think that if you can reduce tension, then the more you can reduce tension, the more you will be free, easy, repeatable. Because you're not going to keep that same tension through the whole motion. Why not just get rid of it in the beginning? As you lift up, the work should be done with your leg, okay? And this lower leg should be dangling. Like what I'll do with kids is I'll put my arm, I got to try to do this to myself, but I'll put my arm under my balance leg, under their balance leg, and then just ask them to kind of dangle their arm, or dangle their leg, excuse me. And then wherever that toe comes to rest, that's the balance point. Okay, it's just nice and relaxed. There's no tension here. It's just dangling. Same thing with this lower leg. It's just dangling. At the moment I'm pulling or the moment I'm pushing, right, I add tension. I add tension in the hip joint. Tension's a killer. You heard that if you're older, but let's just not start it in our pitching motion because it'll translate, it'll propagate, it'll continue on throughout the rest of the motion. So lift to balance. Hands somewhere, midline, okay, going down the handbrake, all connected. I think that's pretty much it. A couple other component parts is thinking about your upper half posture. I'm not too worried about it. I would say just keep an eye on the kids that lean back. This is a balancing mechanism because they're out of balance. They should somewhere have their head over their pivot foot, this back leg in the bottom that I'm standing on. Whether they want to have a little bit of posture and a little bit of curvature in their back, I'm okay with. Whether there be a little bit of a slight rotation with the upper torso, that's okay too. Think about the weight being distributed in this back haunches, this right buttock or your back leg buttock. You should also feel the weight distribution on your foot. I've heard some people talk about being on the ball of your foot. I tend to want to have most of my weight distributed evenly across the foot, and if nothing else, maybe early on I want to have it, again, back here. If you just simply stand here in this wind-up position, if you kind of shift your weight from butt cheek to butt cheek, you should feel a massive weight transfer from one side to other. And similarly, then if I'm going into this set position, if I'm taking the sign evenly, and then I'm coming set, I should feel a bunch of that weight now having shifted onto this right side. So if I'm here and I shift over, right weight into my right pivot foot, I should be able to just lift right from here. I shouldn't have to swing. I should just be able to, right, if I'm set, I'm not going to do this, but for example, I could simply just shift and sit down in my right back pivot side and then lift up. Okay, that would be another element that I would mention is do not swing to balance, lift to balance. Balance point does not mean lift up, or excuse me, swing up, because if you're swinging up, that means you're not controlling your lift. You need to control your lift to balance. All right, I'm going to go ahead and include the wind-up step here as part of it. Couple keys. I know there's some new high school rules, but the main concepts that I want to get across, twofold. One, try to keep your head over your pivot foot. Okay? The moment I see guys' heads move outside of their pivot foot or behind, tells me that now they have to fight their body in multiple directions. Okay? Ultimately, this pivot step, whatever this drop step is, this is just a timing mechanism to allow my hips to clear and allow me to lift, right? A lot of times what I'll see guys do is they'll start using this pivot step, this drop step, this wind-up step as a mechanism that isn't controlled and becomes a swinging momentum builder, and then they fall out of mechanical balance. Okay? So use this wind-up step simply as a mechanism to help with rhythm, tempo, and get your hips cleared in preparation for the balance lift. So generally speaking, I like to preach a small off to the side, back into the side, keeping your head over your pivot foot as much as possible. Then you can lift instead of side swing, right? You see those guys doing that all the time. So those are the key fundamentals of the rocker step, the wind-up step. Keep your head over your pivot foot, lift to balance, allow yourself to hip clear. Is it okay to go back? I wouldn't recommend going straight back, and the reason being is if you're going back, you now have to get your foot all the way twisted, and that's really hard. It's hard on my body. And then you've got to unwind, and you could argue and say, yeah, but I want to be coiled. Okay, that's true, but I don't want the act of coiling to get me there. I want to lift to a balanced coil, not twist to a balanced coil. So if I'm going to be a coil person, I'm going to pull, and then I'm probably going to lift into this coil, not swing into this coil. Similarly, if you're someone who steps off to the side, I would caution you and say, if you're moving this way to this way, well, guess what? You've got to move this way, stop yourself somewhere in the middle, twist, and then start going this way. So why are you going to make it harder on yourself? I would just encourage, keep the head over the pivot foot. That solves most all of these problems. Keep it small. I would recommend slightly back into the side or even just to the side, whatever you prefer. Keep that head over the pivot, lift up, and you're good to go. All right.